I'm warning you, this is going to ruin Star Citizen on a traditional monitor. Because once you've stood in a hangar in VR and looked up at a ship the size of a building, you stop thinking cool graphics and start thinking, I'm here. So be honest, how long do you think it takes before your brain accepts the lie? 10 minutes? 30? One session? And here's the part that I'm going to hold back for a second, because there are three things that decide whether VR Star Citizen feels like a place or a nausea simulator with pretty clouds. I'll tell you exactly what those are later, because if you skip ahead, you're going to miss why it matters. But before we begin, let's take a quick poll in the comments. What's the first thing that you do in VRSC? Dogfight? FPS? EVA? Or would you just walk around a station like you own it? VR is in Star Citizen right now, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it's the most immersed that I've ever been in this game. Like the kind of immersion where you take the headset off and your room feels maybe slightly disappointing for a minute. And what's wild is the vibe around it. Between what I'm seeing in the community and what Pimax has been gathering through their Star Citizen VR community survey push, the interest is massive, to the point where it's really hard to ignore. Now, they haven't publicly posted a full breakdown of results, but the momentum and enthusiasm right now is very obvious. So today's video is basically this: what Star Citizen VR already does insanely well, why 4.6 feels even better than 4.5 for VR, and what happens if we ever stack the Ready Player One accessories on top. I'm talking gloves, suits, treadmills, the whole sci-fi package. And before someone clips me out of context, Star Citizen doesn't need all that to be incredible, but we'll get to that later in the video. Most VR games are built around VR from day one. Star Citizen wasn't. It's dense, it's layered, it's full of small text, deep cockpits, weird lighting, and massive scale. And that's exactly why VR hits so hard here. Because your brain doesn't just see a ship cockpit anymore. You occupy it. Your sense of distance changes immediately. Your spatial awareness wakes up, and scale stops being a concept and becomes a feeling. And this is where clarity becomes everything. If you can't read your MFDs or your cockpit feels smeared, VR turns into squinting in 3D. But if you've already experienced it before, what's the moment that sold you on VR already? Was it the first time that you looked over your shoulder in a dogfight? Was it the first EVA where distance suddenly made sense and you're looking out into the void of space? Or was it the first time that you walked into a hangar and felt small in a way a monitor just can't replicate? Because that moment matters. It's the point where Star Citizen stops being something that you're watching through a screen and starts feeling like somewhere you're actually standing. It's when your brain finally buys the scale, the depth, and the danger as real. And once it clicks, you don't just play Star Citizen anymore. You inhabit it. Now let's talk about why 4.6 matters. Now we've already covered VR getting implemented with 4.5 in a previous video, so I'm not going to relitigate the whole "it's finally here" moment. Today is about the next step. If 4.5 was Star Citizen saying, okay, VR is real, let's do this, then 4.6 feels like, all right, let's sand the rough edges. Head movement so far feels cleaner. The experience feels a bit more stable. And the overall trust your brain has in the motion just feels better. But here's my question to you. Are you running VR in 4.5 right now, or have you tested 4.6 yet? And if you have, did it feel like a much bigger improvement than 4.5? Now remember those three make it or break it factors that I mentioned? You probably already felt at least one of them in your own setup. And if you fix the right one first, VR goes from "this is really cool" to "I am never taking this headset off." So let's pin them down. These are the three things that decide whether Star Citizen VR feels god tier or like your stomach's about to stop you from what you actually wanted to do today. First, clarity. If your cockpit looks like it's covered in petroleum jelly, you're not immersed. You're just squinting in 3D, as I mentioned earlier. And Star Citizen's cockpit design punishes low clarity. Second, performance stability. Not peak FPS for 5 seconds. I mean, stable frame pacing so your brain trusts motion. That's the difference between I could do this all night and I'm taking this headset off in 20 minutes. Third, UI behavior and scaling. Because if the UI fights you, VR stops becoming magic and becomes a whole lot more work. Which one is the biggest limiter right now? Clarity, performance, or UI? By the way, if you're into Star Citizen deep dives like this, VR, flight, combat, gear reviews, hit subscribe. I'm gonna keep this practical and honest because I've got no time and no interest in hype that doesn't survive contact with reality. But let's get back to it. Now let's go full concept mode. Not tomorrow, not next patch, just where this goes if the tech keeps maturing. Because Star Citizen in VR is already insane, and this is how it starts tipping into Ready Player One territory. First, haptic gloves. I'm talking gloves that let you use your hands like actual hands, grabbing switches, pushing buttons, climbing ladders, handing tools, even just physically picking things up instead of treating everything like a menu. The moment you can reach for interactions, the game stops feeling like a UI and starts feeling like a space you operate inside. What interaction would you want first? Chip switches, medical tools, reloading, or cargo handling? Second, a haptic vest or a full haptic suit. I'm not talking for pain, only sociopaths and masochists need that. I mean for presence. Engine rumble through your chest, the thunk of landing gear, recoil, nearby impacts that you don't just hear, you feel. That's the layer that convinces your nervous system this world has weight. Now, would haptics add to your immersion, or would it just get old fast? Third, the grand old Omni treadmill. This one's the most convincing and probably the most annoying, because walking through stations at real scale, turning your body, moving naturally, that would feel unreal, but also a lot more work. But it's also the easiest way to buy a $2,000 coat rack if you don't actually commit to using it. So be honest, if you had an Omni treadmill, would you actually use it, or would it become another piece of furniture? Now, if I want to get 20,000 extra steps a day, I'm absolutely going to use it. But here's where Star Citizen becomes dangerous, but in the absolute best possible way. You wake up in a hab. You open your Mobi-Glass, accept a contract. You ride the tram while the city slides past. You step into the hangar and your ship is there. Massive, loud, and real. And you don't feel like you're playing. You feel like you're reporting for something. That's the Ready Player One edge. Not because it's a gimmick, but because your brain starts buying the lie. What was your I can't believe this is real moment in VR in Star Citizen? Was it your first atmospheric exit? Your first EVA? First firefight? Or the first time that you walked through a capital ship interior? And here's the important part. Star Citizen doesn't need gloves, suits, treadmills, or any of that to be convincing. A solid mouse and keyboard setup already gives you control and precision. A good HOTAS or HOSAS setup already gives you that pilot feeling. VR is an amplifier, not the foundation. And while it gives you incredible presence, it's not necessarily needed to sell the immersion factor. So even if you never buy a single accessory beyond a headset, you can still have a top-tier experience. Now, quick hardware note, because I know some of you are going to ask. The reason something like the Pimax Crystal Super even belongs in the conversation is simple. Star Citizen is one of those games where clarity and field of view actually change the experience. If your headset can't keep cockpit text readable, if the darkness turns into mush, if scale doesn't feel clean, VR goes from magical to frustrating real fast. A sharper, wider view is what makes the cockpit feel right instead of almost. And I'm not saying that you need it. I'm saying if you're already shopping VR for Sims, this is the class of headset that makes Star Citizen VR feel less like a novelty and more like the way it was meant to be seen. Also, if you already own a VR headset, Pimax has an upgrade program running where you can get perks just by showing proof that you own one. The best part, you don't have to send in your old headset. Depending on what you're upgrading to, that can mean money off or even bonus gear bundled in. If you want to check that out, I'll have all the details linked in the description. And if you decide to pick one up, you can use my code HAVOC at checkout. And because I am a Pimax partner, I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you. What matters most to you in VR? Clarity, comfort, field of view, or performance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But now it's your turn. If you could only pick one Ready Player One accessory, gloves, suit, or a treadmill, what's the one you'd actually commit to? And what's the first thing that you're doing the second that you log into VR? If you want to support the channel beyond subscribing, consider becoming a YouTube member. It directly helps me keep making these deep dives and reviews, and you'll get all of the perks such as members-only Discord channels, recognition, early stuff, the whole deal. And if you want to see my first impressions and first look at Star Citizen in VR, check out the video that I've got linked at the end. As always, thanks so much for watching. Fly safe, pilots, and we'll see you in the verse. HAVOC out.